these are the first visuals that are being beamed of Donald Trump, who's just left the courtroom in Manhattan. We expect him to, of course, head back to his home in Florida, where he's expected to speak later to his supporters. But there are four things that you need to remember. Donald Trump was arrested when he stepped inside of the Manhattan courtroom. He was fingerprinted, is the information that has come in. And subsequently, he's also heard the charges, is what we are told. But these charges, even till now, have not been made public. He has pleaded not guilty to 34 counts of charges that have been leveled against him. He will contest this case. And what is also interesting is that Donald Trump did not come out of the front entrance of the Manhattan courtroom. He managed to leave the courtroom from one of the back entrances where his convoy of cars was ready. And this, of course, is the convoy of at least about 10 odd cars in which he is now heading off from the Manhattan court after the arraignment process. The court hearing is over. He's now in his motorcade. And this is a pivotal moment. Remember, in American politics, the former president of the United States of America, Donald Trump, is now on his way back. We're given to understand that his private jet is waiting for him to return to Florida tonight. We still do not know if there is a gag order on him to talk about this legal case. There could be a gag order. Donald Trump has chosen not to talk to the press. Donald Trump has not given a statement, but we could expect something from him on his social media account. But will he talk about this particular legal case? Because remember, he has been advised by his legal team to not speak to the media about this particular legal tangle that he's presently involved in. And he's apparently been given the legal advice that anything that he says will be used against him and could potentially damage his case. And therefore, he's chosen not to engage or talk to the media. But what you're looking at on the right of your screens at this moment are these images of Donald Trump as he was sitting inside of the court, hearing what the judge had to say very patiently. At this moment, we still do not have a clear idea on what the 34 counts of charges are. But what is abundantly clear at this moment is that Donald Trump is now on his way back. And also, the American president, Joe Biden, has said that he's got nothing to comment on today's events in New York. Joe Biden reportedly was in a meeting with science and technology experts at the White House and did not answer any questions that were shouted by the reporters when asked about his predecessor appearing in a court in Manhattan. So Joe Biden, the man who is now the President of the United States of America, has got nothing to say and has maintained a complete silence over this issue. This is, of course, the update that is coming from the White House. But on the other side, what you're looking at is this convoy of cars in which Donald Trump is now making his way off and away from the Manhattan court. And my colleague Susan Tehrani has been tracking the story very closely for us. Susan, bring us up to speed with the latest that you've picked up. We still do not know the charges are. When is it that the public will be made aware of the 34 counts of charges that have been leveled against Donald Trump?
We'll have to wait and see, Mohammed, because this is such a significant and, new case. It's very different from the standard procedure. But I think we'll get an understanding of what the charges are shortly. We do know that the former president left the courthouse, ignoring reporters' questions and heading back to Trump Tower, where he'll head back to Mar-a-Lago, of course. It's interesting to find out whether or not the judge, however, did issue that gag order against the former president or not. That's something we'll be looking out for, as well as those charges that you mentioned.
Absolutely, indeed. Now, according to the information that we have, he's reportedly spent nearly about 57 minutes inside of the court. And this, of course, is the convoy of his cars, which is making its way off and away from the Manhattan court. He's got a private jet ready with which he'll fly back to Florida. And Susan, as you correctly pointed out, we need to wait and watch for whether there is a gag order that has been put on Donald Trump to talk about this. Because Donald Trump has again chosen to not engage with the media. He left from one of the back entrances of the court where his convoy of cars, 4 or 5 cars, were waiting for him. He got into his car and then quietly drove away without saying anything. Not a word has been uttered by him. But we still don't have any clarity on the 34 criminal charges that have been filed against him at the Manhattan Criminal Court. And it's all still in the realm of speculation, although this is what it most likely is. The investigation is stemmed from a hush money payment that he made to Stormy Daniels during the 2016 presidential campaign. Now, Susan, we're given to understand that Donald Trump is flying back to Florida. He also has an event where he'll be addressing his followers. But, looking at what has happened so far in the case, what happens next? Where does this case go from here?
So the case is a very lengthy process, and that's a very good question. So the prosecutors now have about 15 days to present the court with all kinds of evidence that they have. That means witness testimony, paperwork, and all of that. And then once they do that, then, the case goes into order, and these are evidence that are presented to the grand jury. Trump's lawyers are hoping that ultimately what will happen is the grand jury will see the evidence and they'll just on their own throw this case out, saying that, it has no merit, it's flimsy. But we'll have to wait and see. But after those 15 days, then, then a court date is established. And then, it could even take maybe up to 6 months to see how long this case drags.
Absolutely, indeed. That's going to be crucial in the case in terms of, what exactly will be the legal procedure from here on and how things will proceed. We'll wait and watch. Susan, we also have, reports which we've got that the New York District Attorney Alvin Bragg could, in fact, address the media at about 15:30 local time in New York. And this will be the first time that Alvin Bragg will be commenting publicly on the case. Have you picked up anything on the front as to what the New York District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, is likely to say in some time from now?
We can guess what he's going to be saying. It's probably going to be in the line of what he's been saying before, which is, we're not going to be intimidated. The law is going to take its course.
Right.
No one is above the law. We heard similar sentiments by Chuck Schumer from Capitol Hill being made as well. So we'll have to wait and see what he has to say. But it's 7 minutes after 3:30 right now. We haven't heard from him. All
right, interesting. But, the question that I also want to ask you is, when will these charges, these 34 counts of charges that are being framed against Donald Trump, when are they likely to be made public? Is it Alvin Bragg, the New York District Attorney, who will make them public? How is that procedure likely to happen? Because it's baffling that despite the fact that we are talking so much about this case and Donald Trump has already appeared in the court, we still do not know what he's been charged with.
Yes, that's right. We still don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I don't know if Alvin Bragg is going to come out and talk about that. That's, like I said, it's very uncharted territory because it's the first time that we're seeing such a high-profile case, notably a former president. It's anything but ordinary. We'll have to wait and see, really.
Absolutely, indeed. We'll, of course, have to wait and see because this is definitely uncharted territory. Never in the history of the United States of America has something happened quite like this, where a former president of the United States of America has been criminally charged and was arrested in a court and then, of course, let go. Donald Trump's court appearance is quite clearly ended, but what is clear is that this, of course, is the beginning of this case, and it remains to be seen as to how all of this will, of course, play out. But, Susan, away from the legal aspects of the case, where nothing is really clear yet, the political optics of what in fact is played out in front of the Manhattan court is something that will feature very prominently in every newspaper tomorrow, because quite evidently this is a case that has divided again the United States of America right down the middle. We saw a bunch of supporters of Donald Trump, a bunch of detractors of Donald Trump, who of course got into some kind of, pushing and shoving that was witnessed. There was this flag which, this huge banner that was laid out on the road which said Trump lies all the time. This was something that was not appreciated by the Trump supporter, who then went in and tried to take that off. Many would say that this is something that is indicative of American politics at this moment.
Yeah, we actually witnessed that. That was probably the only incident that sort of physical altercation really happened, and it was really caught by so many media outlets. The police broke it up very quickly. And as you mentioned, on the one side of that park that's across this Manhattan courtroom, you see supporters of the former president standing with their posters and banners and flags in hand, and then on the other side, you see a group of others that are shouting at one another, profanity sometimes, and then at other times, just chanting their own chants. And when I talked to the NYPD, the police department, because there was just the crowd was so much, I couldn't see for myself, but I asked, I was interested that they're so segregated, each of them. And I said, is there a barricade between them? And the police officer said, yes, there was no other way to really keep them calm. So it was interesting that, despite calls for peaceful protests, the protests were peaceful, but these individuals that came out to protest were also very contained as well, with barricades around them in the park.
Absolutely, indeed.
So I don't know what would have happened if those barricades weren't there.
Absolutely, indeed. So that's something which the New York police seems to have done right in keeping the supporters of Donald Trump and his detractors in two separate compartments, so to speak. Now, Susan, as you've been pointing out that we are in uncharted territory, it is difficult at this moment to predict what can happen or what could happen. But some of the detractors of Donald Trump, people who are, as one would put it, in the Democrat camp, they say that this is only the beginning of the legal trouble for Donald Trump. The hush money scandal involving Stormy Daniels is just one aspect of the case. There are so many other legal questions which Donald Trump will have to face the music for. Is this the beginning of the many legal challenges that will be put in front of Donald Trump, so to speak? Because, this is quite clearly what the Democrats have been saying, that, listen, Donald Trump has never come clean on his tax filings. Donald Trump's business dealings are not always clean and above board. Are we likely to witness more such cases?
Yeah, it's definitely. And, I will say that while there are many Democrats who have rejoiced about this prosecution by Alvin Bragg and this indictment in New York, there are Democrats who were a little bit concerned that despite the fact that Donald Trump has multiple cases against him, you have that Mar-a-Lago classified document case, you have the January 6th one, you have one regarding voting in Georgia. This one was the most flimsy out of all of them. And I think some Democrats were concerned that when you bring this one to the forefront as the very beginning of Donald Trump's legal problems, if it does sort of fall apart by the grand jury, or if it's thrown out, or he's not convicted, or it's not taken seriously, as we're seeing, in polls, many believe that it's just a lot of political theater, then those other serious cases will follow suit. People will see it in the same light. So that was a risk that Alvin Bragg decided to take. For better or worse, we'll have to see. Again, we have to see what the charges are. But that's one concern on the part of the Democrats. And then I also think that, while there is a lot of talk that if Joe Biden decides to run, the only person that can beat Donald Trump would be Joe Biden. Joe Biden's numbers are really low right now at this point. But if Donald Trump does become the Republican candidate, and if he does run against Joe Biden, well, the one case that the Democrats will make is that Donald Trump has too many legal issues to deal with to run a country. And then, in that case, then ultimately, the Democrats might think that they have a win by bringing Donald Trump to the forefront of his legal problems. But in the short term right now, has been a win for Donald Trump. I mean, he's gained. We'll have to see whether or not it's long-term gains,
Right.
so to say. But for the short term, his numbers are up. Among the Republican Party, he seems the leader still. His campaign is up. But, general elections are ultimately the answer, not just Republicans.
Absolutely, indeed. And that, of course, is what a lot of people would be looking at very, very closely, because as we speak, and as Donald Trump's convoy seems to be making its way through the traffic in New York, it's difficult to predict as to how, what the consequences of this particular case will be, and what ramifications will this particular case have on the politics at large in the United States of America. Susan, I want you to weigh in a bit on, what some of the Trump supporters have been saying. And this is what they say, that this is such a flimsy case that, no one in the right frame of mind would actually take the charges of the hush money scandal of Stormy Daniels seriously. This is what the Trump supporters, in fact, say. And they've also gone on and said that what is clearly happening at this point of time is a clear case of a political witch hunt, which means that even those Republicans who may not have been supporting Donald Trump before may want to get back behind him and unify behind him. Is that how you view this as well? Is this something that the Republican voters would be willing to, in fact, bite the bullet, so to speak, that they have a candidate, he faces a lot of legal problems, but they would still back him because they see him as a victim of a political witch hunt?
That could happen, but then on the other hand, before this happened, that's very plausible right now because his numbers are really showing that in the polls, and his popularity is just even compared to someone like Ron DeSantis, who hasn't declared his candidacy yet, but who's a popular among Republicans. I mean, Donald Trump is 20, 30 points ahead of him. But then there are those Republicans who had previously, after the 2022 midterms, when we didn't really get that red wave, had decided to move on from Donald Trump and are hoping to get new blood, so to say, into the party. So there might be some Republicans ultimately hoping that Donald Trump does not become the nominee and these legal issues bogs him down, so the Republicans can have another nominee, and maybe that nominee would play better against a Democrat, like if, for example, Joe Biden decides to run again, or if it's another Democratic contender. But for the time being, yes, the Republicans have rallied around the former president because ultimately they do believe this is political, and they say that it's just going to set a precedent and open a Pandora's box that you can't shut. There's going to be a prosecutor somewhere that's Republican, and
all right.
He's going to think that, I can do this to a Democrat.
Absolutely, indeed. Susan, now, I think we're getting details of the indictment which have now been made public. Now, according to reports, this is what is being said, that the prosecutors have alleged that Donald Trump was part of an unlawful plan to suppress negative information, including an illegal payment of $130,000 that was ordered by the defendant to suppress the negative information that would hurt his campaign. This is one of the charges. The reason he committed the crime of falsifying business records was in part to promote his candidacy, is what the indictment has alleged. This is the first time that Trump and his lawyers can, of course, fully examine the extent of the charges against him and what the prosecutors must prove at the trial. So the Stormy Daniels and the hush payments scandal is quite clearly right at the top of the charges that have been leveled against Donald Trump. The criminal charges, of course, stem from Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's investigation into the hush money payments that were made during his 2016 presidential bid to women who claimed that they had had an affair with Donald Trump, which Donald Trump has denied. Now, Trump, of course, has denied all wrongdoing, and his lawyers have said that they'll fight to try and get the charges to be dropped. This is, of course, is just information that is trickling in of the charges that have now been made public. Apart from this, one of the other charges against Donald Trump states that the former president was involved in a conspiracy to undermine the integrity of the 2016 election. The prosecutors have alleged that Donald Trump was part of an unlawful plan to suppress negative information, including the illegal payment that was made of $130,000. So this is the latest information that has come in. The indictment has now been unsealed, which had remained under seal for so long. And it's now been put out in the public domain. And this is the charges. These are the charges that Donald Trump now faces. Now, it is also being said that the indictment is alleged that the reason he committed the crime of falsifying business records was in part to promote his candidacy. Trump's voice in the court reportedly was very measured. He walked slowly, scanning the reporters in the courtroom. It remains to be seen, because remember, this of course is...
So let's go. I want to see you those guys fishing. Yeah. Let's go. Good job.
My mom's on the phone. Say hi to my mom.
All right, some reaction by one of the lawyers there from in front of the courthouse coming in. It's still not very clear as to what the lawyer was, of course, trying to say. But remember, this is, of course, a legal case which will be looked at very, very closely with a fine comb in the days to come. Susan, you know, this is an indictment charge which will be read by the legal eagles over the course of the next several hours to try and find out as to what the case, of course, against Donald Trump is. But finally, after waiting for so long, we finally have some of the charges that Donald Trump has been indicted with. This is the moment, one would say, that Donald Trump's legal troubles have begun, and it's not just pertaining to the hush money scandal involving Stormy Daniels and the $130,000 payment that was made to her, but also on several other aspects of him falsifying his business records that the prosecutor is of course leveling against Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we talked about how at least he would face one felony charges. Now we know that he's facing 34 felony charges, really opening a perilous chapter in the long public life of not only a former president, but this billionaire businessman that, you know, he called New York his home at one time. The lawyers of Donald Trump really do have their work cut out for that. We'll wait and see what kind of motions that they're going to file against this. But all 34 counts of felony, that's it's a big chunk right now. And so we have to digest it legally to find out and see what course of action his lawyers want to take regarding this.
Absolutely, indeed, Susan. Thank you very much indeed for joining us from New York and getting us all those insights. This of course, is a story that we'll continue to track very, very closely indeed. The legal troubles for the former President of the United States of America have just begun. The 34 indictment charges, they've now been put out in the public domain. The legal eagles in the United States will take a very fine comb and will go through this. Now, it remains to be seen as to how this, of course, will impact politics in the United States of America, because what we are looking at this moment is a nation that is divided right down the middle, even on a legal case. Trump has rubbished this case and has said that this is a political witch hunt, but his detractors, many of them in the Democrat camp, say that it is law that is taking its course. We'll slip into a short break. More updates will continue on the other side. This is the big story that we are tracking and beyond. Donald Trump, the former President of the United States of America, was arrested briefly in Manhattan and then was allowed to walk free. And the charges, 34 charges, have now been made public. Stay tuned to WION. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.